going to talk to you about a good way to teach your students to assemble the clarinet properly, and also I'll tell you some of the awful things I've seen happen as a result of not doing it properly. So one of the first things to just make sure you do tell your students, even though this might seem really obvious, I can't tell you how many times I've seen students not do this, is to make sure the case is right side up when they open it. A lot of instrument cases might have the logo on the front, but certainly the handle is always on the bottom part. I've seen sometimes kids open the cases and all the pieces tumble out, and that's how you can really damage the instrument. So it's just a good habit to tell them about right from day one. Make sure the case is right side up. Many of your students, when they're beginners, are going to have a brand new clarinet. That's really common. They're excited, they have the new instrument. Probably the most important thing that they need to know at this point is that on a new clarinet, the corks are a little bit thicker than they're going to be once the instrument's been put together a few times and it's settled down. So deliberately, the manufacturers make them a little thick. That makes the instrument hard to put together. The joints are really sticky. And if most kids, when it's sticky, just grab it harder and turn and twist, and that's when we get keys being bent and being damaged. So before they're allowed to put any pieces together, I have them grease all of the corks, and to do it really thoroughly. So just a sort of word of caution, there are many different types of cork grease out there. Most of them come in a tube, something like this. There are different grades of cork grease. I really recommend a high quality cork grease because a low quality one will actually degrade the corks over time and it'll start to disintegrate. So as far as how I tell my students to do it, I always tell them when they're holding the pieces with the keys to try and put much of the pressure on the backside where there aren't many keys, so that we want to avoid anything that's going to put a twisting or bending pressure on the keys. Now they're going to have to touch the keys a little bit, but that's kind of a nice way to do it. For putting cork grease on the corks, it's just like putting on lip balm. You want enough to moisten it, but you don't want big clumps hanging off of it. Sometimes the kids will get just a little bit carried away and do too much. So we want it to be well lubricated, but no need to have big chunks there. And because I've done it a lot, it's pretty fast for me to grease a set of corks. For your beginning students, this might take them 5 minutes. So sometimes when I lead a class with beginners, it takes us 15 minutes to put the clarinet together. And I think that's okay. It's kind of getting them familiar with the pieces, learning each one. They might have to grease the corks every single time they play for about the first 2 weeks. That's how dry and stiff the corks are going to be initially. Over time, they'll become a little bit squished down, they're a little bit more compact, it's easier to put together, then they might have to do it every other time. And eventually, myself, I probably grease my corks about once a week. Kind of depends on the weather, and drier temperatures perhaps more often. But anyway, that's the important first thing to have them do. I like to have my students put together the two pieces with the keys first, just because to a new player, these are kind of the most complicated. And we just want to make sure they're doing it properly. So again, I'm having them try and support the weight on the back side of the instrument where there's not so many keys, just so that they're less likely to bend things. Now, sometimes it's hard for them to figure out kind of like what pieces go together. So I like to show them the bridge keys, which is the bridge between the two instruments. And if we make sure the holes are all facing the same way, that helps them line it up. What you'll notice is one of the pieces, which is the bottom piece, has this little bridge here that's sticking up, and it has its counterpart right here coming down, and it actually is called the bridge key. So the students have to learn to line those pieces up. And if we're not careful, this piece can kind of get jammed in here or bent. So just a little trick you can show your students when they're holding the top joint. You can see these rings here. If I push that ring down, it causes the bridge key to go up. And having that up when we put the pieces together is handy. So now I'm holding the top piece with my fingers on the back, and my thumb is holding the ring down. That's going to make it really easy for that part of the bridge to come down on this part. So I'll usually hold that in there, and I find short back and forth movements is really the best way. Now, as soon as that bridge key has made contact and covers it, then I can hold it up here. If it's really stiff, then again, I'm trying to hold this where I'm not really touching keys, just little sideways movements. It's really important that these bridge keys make a straight line. A lot of times students kind of have it together, but if we take a close look, this is a little crooked. that's going to interfere with the ability of these pads to close properly. One of the functions of the bridge key is that if I push down this right hand ring, it connects to the bridge key and it pushes down the left hand, which is the upper joint. And that's important that that lines up. So that's one of the first things you have them do. So in general, we're telling them to be careful about wrenching the keys, use lots of cork grease, use the bridge key to get that lined up. And then we've done the hard work. The bell, looks like a bell. That one, again, have them hold the clarinet mostly on the back. Now they can also put their fingers holding the ring down so that, again, we're not twisting on those keys. Depends on the size of their hand. Or these two pieces here are pretty sturdy too. Again, short back and forth movements. And this instrument, being brand new, is a little bit stiff. So I find short twist back and forth is a good way to do it. The barrel usually only fits one direction. So if they accidentally put it upside down, it won't fit. So that's fairly easy. And often if there's a logo on it, that helps them to make sure they're upright. Again, I can't help hold keys, but I'll try and hold it in a way where I'm not going to be twisting on it. So I can hold it up near the top. And then I'm just going to be doing short movements back and forth until it's on there. Now, sometimes they're very stiff for beginning students, and you might have to help them put it together. What I sometimes recommend is if they have a safe place at home where no little brothers and sisters or dogs are going to get at their clarinet, that after they've cleaned it out and dried it out, they leave it assembled just for a day or so to get the corks to compress a little bit. Again, it has to be in a safe place, and that would be not in front of a heat vent or anywhere where it could fall down, but just somewhere safe. The mouthpiece. So typically when we pull the mouthpiece out of the case, we will have the cap and the ligature all there together. And I usually ask them to put aside the cap and the ligature just so that they don't end up bending the ligature out of place and just putting the mouthpiece on. A lot of students will put it on backwards by accident, and it's because we have the hole here and their instinct is to line it up with the other holes. So I make sure I tell them that this straight line has to align with the register key, and that gives them a frame of reference. And for this one, they can just hold the barrel and then do short movements back and forth until the mouthpiece is lined up. So I'm just looking to make that a straight line from register key up to the mouthpiece opening. Now at this point, they're going to be ready to put their reeds on, which is very exciting. And if it's a beginner, it's always good to warn them before they're even touching their reeds about how fragile the tip of the reed is. Sometimes I'll turn it sideways so they can see it in profile and show them that it's really as thin as a piece of paper. I will show them that when it's on the mouthpiece, it's going to be vibrating like this, open and shut, and also explain that it vibrates much better when it's wet. So some students will have a little glass of water they can put it in. What most students end up doing is wetting it with their mouth. And at this point, we want to be careful they don't bang it into their teeth. So it's kind of like a popsicle stick that we want to be really careful with. So have them get it wet. First time they put a reed in their mouth, some of them taste funny. They'll make faces, and that's okay. And the taste goes away after the first time you use it, so only a brand new reed will taste funny. I always hold the reeds by the thick part. We never want to have students pushing down on the tip of the reed. So any adjusting they're doing has to be sideways and holding the base of the reed. To be safe, you want your students to make sure the reed is placed in a way that's going to work. When you get more advanced, there's kind of some fine tuning, moving the reed up or down or lower. But if a student doesn't have the reed on where it works, it's going to be squeaky and squawky and they're going to be frustrated. So to be safe, I say line the tip of the reed up even with the tip of the mouthpiece and make sure it's centered. So I'll put it on there and I'll take a look at what my students are doing and just make sure it's centered. If it's crooked or too low so that when the reed closes, it doesn't completely seal the hole, it's going to be very difficult to play, or it won't play at all. And that's where you're going to lose your students. Now there's two schools of thought to whether the reed goes first or the ligature goes first. There are benefits to both. So if the reed goes on first, you have a little bit more flexibility in making sure it's lined up properly. The downside is, if kids aren't careful, and a lot of kids aren't, in putting the ligature on, you're going to crash the reed tip and break the reed. So for safety's sake, a lot of people recommend we actually put the ligature on first. Then we take our reed, and what I'm doing now is I'm just pushing the ligature up a little bit so I have a nice open hole here, and I slide the reed down into that opening. Now, the instinct's going to be for the kids to push the tip down. Don't let them do that. They're going to break it. We do all of our adjusting from the base of the reed and from the edges where we're not going to break the tip. So right now, I'm wiggling it up to try and get the reed even with the tip of the mouthpiece. And the best way to see that is we're just going to look on it square on, which I'll take a moment to do. That looks good. I'm centered. I'm even with the top. If they have the classic 2-screw ligature like this, we want the bottom screw to be a little bit snug, certainly not as tight as it can go, but a little bit snug. The top screw really just so that it's not loose. It doesn't have to be as tight. If the instinct is to screw it on as hard as it will go, we tend to choke the reed a little bit, but it also has to be firmly enough that the reed's not going to get knocked out of adjustment. So that kind of gets us put together. It is very important that the reed, as I say, is centered and in a place where when I push it closed, it's going to completely seal across that hole. Otherwise, it's not going to work. I will often inspect each student's position on the reed before I let them play their first note. So before we go into how do we make the first sound, I want to make sure that that's set. So I think that covers the basics of how we put the mouthpiece and the clarinet and the reed and everything together. The mouthpiece cap, it's good to introduce them to once the reed is on there, because it's a useful tool even in the middle of a class or a lesson that as soon as you're at a point where the student's not playing but you're going to be talking a while, if they put the cap on the mouthpiece, again, they have to be very careful not to crash into the reed. It keeps the reed from drying out. A lot of times if I'm just having students finger, I'll have them put the cap on so they don't crack it into their shoulder. So with the cap, it's good to train your students to use it so that they're in the habit of taking it off, setting it on their music stand when they're playing, and then putting it back on during the lulls in rehearsal or when they're doing a rhythm exercise or something else. That pretty well covers the basics of how to put the instrument together properly.